Welcome, my name's Steve Moss. I'm the president of the Oregonian Media Group. We are, if you are familiar with our Big Idea series, this is our year-long series that explores the most important issues facing our city, none more important than homelessness. At the Oregonian, we're really committed to these sorts of events. We're doing more of them now. We believe in our print product, our digital product, but nothing replaces the live experience with leaders from our industry and from people from our content organization. If you're interested in posting for social media this evening, you can use the hashtag PDX Homelessness, or you can tag our @Oregonian social accounts. I want to make a special thanks to our presenting sponsor, The Standard. We couldn't do these without their support. And now I'm going to turn it over to our moderator. Len Reed is the Pulitzer Prize-winning editorial writer at the Oregonian, and he will take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks, everybody, for coming out in, well, when I came over, it was pitchforks. I think it looks pretty good out there now. And also, I was thinking on the way over that the weather has been terrific in recent weeks, and not today. And it's going to get good again tomorrow, I think, or the day after. But it stays. But one thing hasn't changed, and that is 1,800 and maybe 20. The count changes. People were sleeping outside last night. They're going to do that again tonight, under tarps, I guess. So many of them in tents. Luckily, some with plastic garbage bags taped together. That doesn't change. The weather changes, but that doesn't change. And that's a big, dang problem in Portland. So I want to thank you again for coming out in the rain on a subject that has us vexed. Hello, Homer. I want to talk just for a minute about the homeless before I introduce you to our terrific panel. Their journey during the day is, I would learn, strange and difficult. It depends on what kind of condition you're in. If you're unimpaired, don't have an alcohol or a drug problem, you might dial 211. You might get a number on the waiting list of a shelter and be advised, call us back in a day or two and let us know where you are still on the waiting list. Portland is currently underserved by about half on shelter space. So when I was talking about the 1,800 people who were sleeping out tonight, all of the shelter beds elsewise are full. That brings the number up to like over 3,000 who are technically homeless. And we can talk about all of them tonight, but the ones I'd like to really focus on are those who, many of whom you drove past coming here and could see in grassy places or tucked in bushes or under bridge overpasses. It's a bit of a difficult situation that isn't resolving very fast. The circumstance of the theoretical homeless person who is unimpaired, and that's the best case scenario, could go on for days, weeks, even months. If the person is beset, and many of them are, Council for American Cities did an estimate of about 30%. Does that register here? Mentally ill? 30 to 35%. You can imagine how bewildering it is to be on the street and try to figure rationally, what do I do next? That becomes very tricky. Somehow, the homeless circumstance that we have just doesn't register with the Portland that the national media celebrates, the boutique of prosperity, the green utopia awaiting the best and the brightest, and where everybody goes skiing. I did read that one place, and where tourists come to see one of America's last great vibrant downtowns that you can walk around safely. But in other ways, we have these other stresses. Rents are sky high, and they're going higher. House prices are stratospheric and going higher. Affordable housing, we've heard that term thrown around. What is that really? By the city's own accounting, we were, as of 2014, 20,000 units short for families earning about $22,000 a year. Meanwhile, some tourists who come leave feeling duped. Where do the homeless fit in? Let me give you one instruction before we go to the panel. There are people in Oregonian t-shirts who are going to move up and down the aisles. If you look at them, raise your hands back there. Please write down any questions you may have on the note card that was on your chair. They will be picking them up. Others here will be sorting them and handing them to me. So I will drive questions at the front end of the show, and by the end of it, it's going to all be you, because we really want to cover as much ground as we can and keep a brisk pace about it. Let me introduce our distinguished panel. On the far end, Michelle Cardinal is the CEO and co-founder of R2C Group, an advertising agency situated near the North Park blocks. Michelle entered the news conversation in this town, you may remember, as a business person who found the presence of homeless people in some downtown areas to pose challenges to business. She subsequently served on the mayor's task force to address the issue and has become deeply engaged in it. Ted Wheeler, second from me here, presently the Oregon State Treasurer, will become Portland's mayor in January. In running for mayor in this year's primary, many of you may recall, Ted pledged to end homelessness by 2019.
Well,
It was a promise that both inspired and stunned many of us. Israel Bayer, we're just getting started, Ted, too. Israel Bayer is director of Street Roots. He's second from the end, and that's the newspaper that chronicles life on the street. Many of you have seen it. Israel understands, perhaps more than anyone in the room tonight, who the homeless are and the uphill struggle that they face in finding shelter, jobs, and homes. Mitch Horniker is in the center of the panel. He's executive vice president of Howard S. Wright Balfour Beatty, the construction firm, and he chairs the board of directors for the Portland Business Alliance, which has frankly had a touch-and-go relationship with City Hall over homeless policy. Mitch is perhaps best known for his work in this community, however, as a youth advocate and a community volunteer. He's deeply engaged in this subject. And next to me right here is Deborah Kafori, chair of the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners. And Deborah has long advocated for homeless solutions and recently helped forge a $30 million a year partnership with the city of Portland to realign efforts to meet the needs of homeless people. Thank you all for joining us. We have some very specific narrow bore questions, but first I want to do some big at 30,000 feet questions that really can dispel some mythologies and address some of the concerns a lot of people bring to the subject right now. Question. Summer is near. The homeless population is again expected to swell as it does in summer. The shelters are full every night, leaving perhaps 2,000 people out without a place to sleep. The city's temporary and liberal safe sleep policy, you'll recall that was instituted in February. It's due to be up, I think, in about a month. I don't know whether it's going to be renewed or whether it will be stopped or whether a review will be made of how effective it was or was not. In any event, that's going to end soon. So, Deborah, what should we expect in the coming weeks? Who's doing what?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that we are hard at work trying to locate a new shelter space. We realize that we are woefully under-sheltered in our community, and we have 2 new sites that will be coming online in late summer, early fall. Actually, as soon as possible is our goal. And our focus really is to start the implementation of our plan, A Home for Everyone, which is what's going to be funded by the new partnership between the city and the county that you mentioned. Those dollars are going to be directed within this next year. We have goals of putting 4,300 people into permanent housing, diverting and preventing 5,600 people from becoming homeless in the first place, and opening up 650 new shelter beds. So that is our goal for this year, and we have the money in hand. We just need to get to work, and that's what we're going to do.
I'm tracking you on the math. How many people does that leave on the street each night?
Well, I don't have my calculator in front of me, but I'm sure that there will be people sleeping on the street, even if we opened up 1,800
Right.
shelter beds tonight. Tomorrow night there would be more people sleeping on the streets. And that's why we have this 3-pronged approach, because it's not just about getting people into shelter. It's about getting people out of shelter into permanent housing, and it's about preventing people from becoming homeless in the first place.
Well, on the subject of housing, let's divert quickly that, because the city council is about to adopt a plan to raise $250 million in taxes that would go to the voters in the fall to approve or disapprove for the purpose of building affordable housing. It's not clear to me, and I would invite anybody on the panel to help us know what affordable housing means. Is that at the bottom of income earning? Is that in the middle? Does anybody know?
Israel?
So to tell the story of where we are today, it's really important to put things into context. And we are 40 years on to modern day homelessness. 4 key things happened in the 1980s. We lost about $60 billion of federal funding annually as a nation. The agricultural department stopped funding housing in rural America. The mental health institution was deinstitutionalized, and incarceration rates went up in some cases nearly 700%. That's created an environment locally that forces local communities to carry the water for what was seen as a public infrastructure and priority from the federal government. So here we are today asking voters to be able to support an affordable housing bond that would go to our lowest and most vulnerable citizens, our lowest income earners. We're hoping that $250 million will help support basic infrastructure that will help create affordable housing stock for elders and people that don't have the ability to pay rent due to disabilities, due to aging, due to a multitude of different things. So that $250 million is a wise investment, because we cannot, in our system, currently produce a return of housing that will allow us to be able to house those individuals. So that bond measure is very necessary and something that we have to do to be able to end homelessness.
It is competitive with other choices voters will have in the fall to raise money for other purposes. I'm interested, and back to you, Deborah, on this, whether or not that in any way crosses with the city's and the county's joint $30 million annual investment in its efforts.
The bond measure that the city of Portland will be referring to voters, the vote that they're going to take is next week. The referral will be for the November ballot. That money can only be used for infrastructure. None of it can be used for services. So the dollars that I'm talking about, that the city and the county have put, the unprecedented levels of funding that we've put towards helping people get off the streets and into housing, is for services. So that's where the difference is. It's really a continuum. If there's one takeaway I want people to get out of tonight, it's that there is no silver bullet. There is no great idea, or big idea, out there in a different community that we can just take and put into Portland and end homelessness. It's not going to happen. There are a series of concrete steps that we can take when we come together as a community and prioritize getting people off the streets and into housing. There are concrete steps we can take, and those are what I've talked about earlier. A part of that is the services we need. A part of that is this housing bond measure that will create units so people have a place to live.
Well, let's talk for a minute about ideas from elsewhere, because a big news story in recent weeks, although not new to Ted because you did talk about it during your campaign, is what they're doing in San Antonio. And I did say hello to Homer Williams, who's, I believe, in the House. Homer is familiar to many of us in this room for having led the investment and development of the Pearl District, as well as South Waterfront. So he has big footprints around town. And he's been to San Antonio 5 times, and in recent weeks has been shopping the idea to prominent business people, frankly, my words, not his, who can write checks. This is really interesting. San Antonio has a campus, a compound, call it what you want, a one single humongous place that they've spent $115 million on, with a $15 million operating budget. Half of the budget is paid for by businesses in town, and it's run as a business. I don't think any idea is particularly off the shelf, ready to go for Portland, but let's go there. Let's see, is that, and Ted, why don't you go there? How is that pertinent to our discussion tonight? What could it do for us?
First of all, let me just say this. I want to reiterate something that a couple of panelists have already intimated. Number one, the homelessness problem is very complex. When we talk about homeless, we sometimes act as though we're talking about a homogeneous population. We are not. People are homeless for a lot of different reasons. Some have experienced economic shocks, and we're certainly seeing that here in the Portland area with the cost of housing going through the roof. Others struggle with addiction. Others still live with the implications of mental health issues. There's a lot of youth on our streets, and they have their own panoply of issues that need to be addressed. Because it is a complex causality, it also means that the solution has to be comprehensive. I agree with what Deborah just said. There is no single approach that is going to fix the entirety of this problem. It's going to require a lot of different approaches, and I strongly support what the city and the county are currently engaged in. The Home for Everyone Coalition, and Mark Jolin, who leads that, is here tonight in the audience as well. But I've also encouraged us to look at innovative strategies that are being used elsewhere. And one of the reasons I like San Antonio's model, amongst others, is the core partnership aspect of it. Number one, there's 46 different nonprofit providers that come together at one location, and they've had to work hard over a long period of time to be able to coordinate their services effectively. That's not something they were able to do overnight. Number two, I like the fact that you have the private sector stepping forward in being not only a full partner in terms of moral support and inspiration, but also being willing to raise resources to help make it happen. I think that's critically important. And number three, one of the reasons that I like that model better than some of the models we have in place today is it's not a static model, it's a dynamic model. If you simply say we're going to accept over the long term people camping wherever, they may not have access to services. They may not have access to water. They may not have access to showers and laundry and clothing and the kind of things that help people move from the streets into housing or reconnect with families or jobs or anything else. And so San Antonio really looks at, as their primary objective, how do we move people off the streets and how do we keep them off the streets? I want to say this, though. When I'm talking about San Antonio or Vancouver, BC, or Albuquerque, New Mexico, or Denver or anywhere else, we have our own issues, and we have our own population, and we have our own needs. These models can inspire us, and these models can help direct us, but at the end of the day, we're going to have to find our own unique approach to these models. But I think that San Antonio model has a lot to offer, and I'm appreciative of the fact the private sector is willing to come forward for the first time really as a full financial partner in what we're trying to accomplish. Government can't do this alone. No way, no how.
Let's
And
go
so I
to,
appreciate that people are coming forward with ideas.
thank you. Let's go to the business participation angle of that whole proposition. And Mitch, maybe you can help us with this, because the Portland Business Alliance in the last year has made more than a couple unsuccessful entreaties to City Hall to have a place at the table to work on homeless policy. This wouldn't be exactly that, but what is the temperature, what is the willingness of the business community to step up San Antonio style for something of this scale, or something that would be on the way to that scale?
Lynn, great question. I'd like to start by kind of taking a step back and addressing the suggestion, I think, that a lot of people feel that there is a divide between our social service organizations and the business community. And it just isn't true. I would tell, I believe I'm going to be accurate on this. I think everybody on this panel will agree that we have failed our most vulnerable fellow citizens. The numbers that you gave, Lynn, are an absolute outrage and an embarrassment to me, to, I'm sure, you, to everybody that is putting their heart and soul into trying to address this problem. So we're united in that. There's a lot going on between business and social service, and I think it's important to understand that when services are provided, they are not provided by the government. In our metro area, when services are provided, they're contracted out to private social service organizations. Wonderful, professional organizations. Central City, Transition Projects, New Avenues for Youth, Janus, there's just on and on and on and on. Great programs. All of those programs are supported with private dollars. So the business community is already deeply involved in this problem. So I think it's important to remember that we're all at the table already. We're all, the great thing that our community has going for it is we are in agreement that something has to be done. I believe there's continuity in the belief that we're on the right track in terms of the plan and the home for everyone. How it gets done exactly and who the players are going to be is the story that's yet to be told. But the business community is already at the table and will remain at the table and is absolutely committed to addressing this really terrible need in the community.
Michelle, I'd like to ask you, because you've had a different course. You were an entrepreneur. Your company's grown quite a lot, but nonetheless, you became aware of the homeless thing through the window of your office.
Right.
And then you've come around to this place Mitch is talking about, of being at the table. Could you just briefly tell folks how it started for you and then how you
Sure.
got to where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a tipping point right now. I've been here for 18 years. I started my company in 1998 in Old Town, and then we moved to the North Park blocks before the Pearl was there. And so we're like one of the original companies that were there and invested in that area. And we love being in the city. And we put our head down and just kind of chugged along for 18 years and didn't really pay attention to what was going on, because Portland's such a wonderful place. And we recruited people, and oh, everybody's got to come to Portland. Our clients love to come to Portland, you know. So fast forward, last summer we had this massive influx, and literally out my window I saw this thing kind of happening in front of us, and it was terrifying. I mean, I'm from Boston. I grew up near the projects. I do not come from money. I do not come from, privilege. So I understand poverty. I understand addiction. But I'd seen things there that I'd never seen before. And it was bad, lots of drug use and prostitution and people with dogs and fighting. And I thought, holy cow, this is going to take, could take my business down, but really the safety of my employees, my clients. So I reached out to the mayor in desperation for help.
This is Charlie Hales.
Yeah, Charlie Hales, and he did respond, and then he invited me to get on this task force. And I realized at that moment, I know nothing about the homeless problem. I mean, we see it and we judge it, but it's, as you were saying, very complex. And to be honest, I had some mentors. I got to know Ed Blackburn at Central City Concern, and he invited me over. Shame on me, I'd never been there, and they're right across the street. And he showed me the work they were doing. I've met Israel, and I've had a chance to meet and get to know people in the community, and I realized we can be better. There's more we can do. So I don't represent big business. I think I mostly represent more of the smaller business, the entrepreneurs. And what I would say is the entrepreneurs are like everybody. They're like you. They're running coffee shops, they're running restaurants, and they desperately need our help. So my perspective on this is that I think we're at a tipping point, and we're ready to, we're already spending extra money for security and sanitation issues and so forth. So I love the Terminal 1 idea. I'm all in. I saw it in the newspaper last week, and I thought, I got to get in contact with these guys. So
Well,
I
the
think it's
Terminal
great.
1 thing is getting very interesting because Commissioner Nick Fish in the city of Portland today just put it up for sale. So there are a lot of moving pieces to that equation. I don't know what that means. We're going to get you, sir, in a minute. I'm going to take us out of the flow of this conversation a little bit to get to some of your questions that have been duly brought up and selected. And here's one that I hear a lot, and we're getting it tonight. And I'm going to ask Israel Beyer to field it. And the question is, and I don't know who wrote it, but it's a good one. How would you respond to the argument that our homeless problem comes from other cities sending their homeless to us? And I'd like to piggyback on that, Israel. You're smiling.
I'm ready to answer.
I know. The piggyback part is, well, if we go solve our homeless problem, doesn't the word get out, and then don't they all come here for the good ride? It's all yours. Who are these people? Where are they from?
Well, we call it the magnet myth on the street. So every city across the nation has that narrative built into the framework and the fabric of their communities. The reality is we live in a world that's connected. We can see and we travel, we understand at a pretty intentional level that homelessness is something that is a part of the narrative in every American city. So tonight in Los Angeles, 70,000 people will sleep on the streets. 70,000 people will sleep on the streets tonight in Los Angeles. 16,000 in San Francisco, 10,000 in San Jose, thousands in Portland, thousands in Seattle. So we're all mirrors of one another, caught in an environment that we have to be able to think about housing as a public infrastructure to help be able to create a healthy society, just like we build our roads and our bridges, just like we fund police, just like we fund fire. Housing is an intricate part of being able to maintain a healthy community, and Portland is no different than any other city.
Israel, it's my job to ask the ugly part of the question, which is, okay, LA's got 60,000. Okay, San Jose's got 16,000 people. But let's say we get a thing going here where we really meet the need. Wouldn't they come here?
Poor people aren't an other. People travel or free. We live in an American country that California is not a foreign country. Washington is not a foreign country. We are Americans that have the right to travel. We're free to move about. And so, if we get something going in Portland, I can guarantee you that every city in America will be knocking down Portland's door to be able to do the philosophies that we're doing, and it will actually be a positive thing. So
That's right.
So Ted or Deborah and Ted, how would a Haven for Hope style facility, San Antonio, big deal, how would that coexist and not compete with a home for everyone? That is, how would they be complementary and work in a kind of symbiosis, if you will? Or maybe, disabuse me of the notion, maybe they can't.
Well, one of the things that and I went to San Antonio a couple of weeks ago to visit, and as I said earlier, there is no silver bullet, and there are things about their program that I really liked, and there were some things that I don't think would fly here and shouldn't fly here in Portland. But one of the things that I did like about what they're doing there is I really liked the fact that they had the integration of services. So it wasn't just the mass sheltering of people, that people had shelter, but they also had access to all of the services that some people need to get back into permanent housing and get off the streets. And so that was a piece of it that I think is very, that is the Portland way. And as we're looking at a home for everyone, I think that creating shelter opportunities where services are located on site is something that we can and will be doing. And I am looking forward to partnering with Homer and the rest of his team on creating such a structure in our community.
I'll stick to the and. I don't think we know the answer to that question yet. This is very early on in the conversation, but there's a lot of people who want to sit around that table and have the conversation, and certainly that's one of the logistical issues that would have to be addressed. What's everybody's role? Who does what? How does it fit in with current service delivery? If there is duplication or overlap, that's obviously not a good use of resources, but to the degree we're bringing something new to the table that can be demonstrated as effective, it's something we should take a hard look at implementing. So I think that's a question to be answered farther down the road. The question now is, do we agree the model works? Is it something that we agree that all or part of would work effectively here? And is it something we want to do? And if the answer is yes, then we start getting to the follow-up questions, one of which is, what's already here? What can we leverage? What isn't here? What do we need to create? So I would just say, from my perspective, the answer is we don't know.
From the department of what's already here, an audience question goes, I think, kind of in that direction. And I know I've had this conversation with Deborah, who becomes dyspeptic on the point, but why has the city not turned Wapato into a homeless shelter? Let me reframe that. Does Wapato have a place in the mix? And if so, in what capacity? Deborah.
Anybody else want to chime in here? I don't believe so. And there are so many reasons that we could spend an entire evening having a conversation, but I'll hit on a couple of the high points.
Let me just interrupt. I think everybody knows Wapato is a county jail 11 to 13 miles way out near Terminal 6. Excuse me.
Thank you. And that's, I think, one of the big reasons right there. I am not going to convince you and the audience tonight that this is not a good location for a facility if you believe that you just want people who are experiencing homelessness to be out of sight, out of mind. If that's your goal, that is the place for you. But if you want people who are experiencing homelessness to get the services they need, to get back on their feet and back into permanent housing, people need services close in to where they have jobs, where they have services, and where they have housing. So having a facility 11 miles away from downtown Portland, 23 miles away from downtown Gresham, creates an obstacle that is just far too complicated and expensive to overcome. I talked earlier about our plan. We are going to be opening up 650 new shelter beds this year, hopefully more if we have partnering with the business community. I'd like to make that number even larger, but I don't believe that Wapato is part of that solution. Israel?
I agree on all fronts. I do think that there is opportunity for a place like Wapato. The very reason we're in this situation is the federal government's disinvestment in housing. And I think that there are future opportunities to think about Our state mental health system is in complete shambles. Well, let's have Salem come in and talk about a joint partnership with the Veterans Administration or HUD or whoever it might be, but you can't, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul right now locally, and we have to use our investments very wisely, and it's an unwise investment. I'll also say about shelters, just really quickly, like, you have to think of shelters as almost triage. Think of it as an emergency room. And so you cannot front load all of the money that you have into shelters without thinking about an upstream approach to be able to get ahead of the situation. So all the things that we're talking about tonight, yes, we need shelters, but shelters are not the answer to ending homelessness.
What is the median?
So,
I want us to be clear, because,
it's housing, it's affordable housing, period.
no,
So-
but
So-
when you say upstream, you're talking about getting from shelter to affordable housing.
So you can't have an investment in a $100 million shelter without passing a housing bond. What we need are both. And so what we have to do is be able to work together to be able to put a wise investment into shelter beds to be able to give people a safe and warm place tonight, but without creating an opportunity of an upstream approach of building affordable housing. I would wager to say that if we took all our money and put it into shelters today, that in 5 to 6 years, street homelessness would double in Portland because we don't have affordable housing stock available. We have to be able to build affordable housing. So it's an and conversation, and you just have to have both of those things.
A question from the audience that everybody talks about at the water cooler. Should I give my spare change or dollars to the homeless person asking for them? If you haven't had that conversation, raise your hand. No, I mean, anybody? What's the recommendation? Israel?
Look, nobody woke up one day when they were graduating high school and said, I want to be homeless, or I want to be on a corner one day begging for money or food. So you can have a lot of external crises in your mind about whether you should give or whether you shouldn't. I tell people to use their gut instincts, be smart. If you have a bad feeling about somebody, walk on, move on. If not, I give $1 to the first person who asks me every single day, and then I don't give again the rest of the day. And so I don't have to have a crisis in my mind whether somebody should or shouldn't have money. I do give my $1, and then I move on. I don't believe that anybody, it's traumatic to beg for money, and I believe you have to make your own choices. So.
I'd also say, because I'm sure he won't, although it's written on his hat, that if you feel a crisis and you don't know who you should give to, there are these lovely vendors all around town who sell, Oregonian, one of the most amazing publications I've ever read. And if it's only $1. So if you feel so inclined and you want to give them $5, they will very much appreciate it. And this is really a wonderful business model. You're helping people get housing, you're helping people turn their lives around, and you're also getting a great product for it.
Thank you. This is another question that really cuts to the larger complexity of the problem. Some of the underpinnings, Ted, I think you alluded to as well earlier. And the interconnectedness of all of the forces that do create homelessness in the first place. I work at Sisters of the Road, a low-cost cafe downtown, and we are seeing more and more people coming in who have been evicted or priced out of their communities. What's being done to keep people housed? So this goes to some very, very powerful forces out there. Does anyone wish to comment on that? Ted,
I'll take
please.
first of all, I'm no expert, but I'll tell you what I think I know. We have a shortage of housing given the demand for housing in this community, right? There's a mismatch between supply and demand at lower price points. We have a chronic shortage of what I would describe as workforce and affordable housing. There you know, housing is affordable to somebody, but right now the average rents in the city of Portland are going through the roof. They're escalating faster than other urban areas across the country. People who are beholden to their landlord through rent in a no-cause eviction environment, which is what we have here in the city of Portland, are obviously on edge. They're concerned about being priced out and moved out, and we're seeing a lot of people being displaced. The legislature made a run at a couple of solutions. Inclusionary zoning was one of those opportunities. They passed a bill. The city of Portland is currently in the process of finalizing what their inclusionary zoning response will be. That's helpful. I have always advocated for renter protections. I think that's a requirement as well. You know, we have this whole spectrum of things that could prevent people from being homeless in the first place. You know, on one end of the spectrum, I'd say you have New York-style rent control, and people know I'm not a huge fan of that for a variety of reasons. But all the way over on the other end of the spectrum is the no-cause eviction process, which is what we have here. And folks, there's a ton of stuff in the middle that we could be doing. And personally, I would like to see a just cause eviction process similar to what's in Seattle. The mayor up there convened developers, realtors, housing advocates, social justice experts, people who are actually living the concern about being priced out and moved out, and they came up with what a lot of people think is a really good solution. We could do that here. But at the end of the day, it's more supply. And we've got to do everything we can to speed up the supply, particularly of workforce and lower income housing. The inspection process, the design review process, all of the pre-development fees that go into affordable and workforce housing, all of these things have to be taken into account as a potential cost to and an impediment to the quick creation of housing. We need more. We need more across the board. I was really happy to see that the City Council is looking at the zoning as part of their comprehensive plan to allow duplexes, triplexes, garden apartments, and other lower cost and creative space uses. We've got to do these things. And so, you know, I think the ball's rolling. There's a lot of people in the community who've advocated for all of these strategies. And I think there is a growing consensus in the city of Portland and throughout the metro region that these are some of the strategies that we need to employ here. Otherwise, it's going to get worse. That's my biggest concern. And I'm going to be even more blunt. I don't want to be San Francisco. I'm really worried about what I see there, where the middle class is being hollowed out, where people in service industries can't afford to live there any longer. You know, it's no longer convenient or affordable for families to be able to live there. San Francisco doesn't want to be where they are, and everybody says we're about 5 years behind San Francisco. We've been warned, and we've got to take some dramatic steps to change the dynamic here so that we don't become San Francisco.
Well, you've mentioned, I lost count at about 8, but you've mentioned many variables in this, and they're all valuable. How, as mayor, do you keep track of that? And let me tell you where I'm coming from with the question. Let's say voters in the fall look at the $250 million proposed tax and say, yes, build that affordable housing. Let's say, yes, we get a good metric and define it as incomes at the lower end, so people who are in great need do get something, get some help. As blocked out now, and we don't yet have full details on this bond measure, they're talking about 1,000 units, 1,000. You're talking in a much larger scale. As mayor, how do you keep a sight line to that?
Again, it's all of the above. We are one of, and I know Israel will correct me on this if I get this wrong, because I know he is the repository of the details on things like this, but I believe there are something like 35 communities around the country of our size, or close to our size, that already have permanent, sustainable sources of funding for lower income housing. We don't have that yet, and it's something we need to add to the mix. But again, as Deborah said right up front, Chair Kafoury, it's not the magic bullet. We also have to make sure that we have proper incentives, that we reduce the time and the cost for developers who want to put affordable housing on the market, and make sure that we also have protections in place for tenants so that they don't become homeless. It's about doing all of these things as part of a broader strategy around housing affordability. It's not just picking one, it's picking a bunch of them and then committing to them and executing on it.
And I'm going to help
Yes.
jump in real quick this isn't going to be just the mayor working on this alone.
Thank you.
He doesn't have to keep this sightline all by himself because he's got all of his partners on the city council. He's got his team across the river at the county commission. He's got the business community. He's got advocates. He's got all of you in the audience. We're all working on this together, folks. This is a team effort. We've got Representative Alyssa Kenny-Geyer out there in the audience. This is a team effort. This is going to be all of us together. But I know, because we're all here tonight and because we're sitting up here, that we care and we know we have to do it.
Does TriMet or mass transit capacity have any role in helping the homeless? Free fares, the ability to ride on buses at length to take a rest. This is a question from the audience has really, frankly, never occurred to me, and I think a very good question.
So TriMet and the larger community play a role in how we think about transportation for low-income people. Street Roots and Opal have been advocating for a low-income bus fare or transportation fare throughout our county. It's absolutely essential to be able to build a healthy society for folks around our region. It's also, it's a conundrum, right? So, for example, how do you, nobody wants to give money. You're a philanthropist, you're a foundation, you're government. Who's given money so that people can have adequate transportation to get around our region? Nobody wants to give a pass-through back to TriMet. So it becomes it's a very complicated, complex situation. So we believe 110% that TriMet has a place at the table and needs to create a low-income fare for people throughout the region.
Forgive the naivete of the follow-up question, but why does nobody want to give money to buy bus passes?
Well, if you're a foundation or you're a philanthropist and you're going to invest, $500, $5,000, $10,000, do you want to give $10,000 to Street Roots so that we turn around and buy bus passes? That's what's happening. So you have to be able to think smarter than that. Street Roots could invest that $10,000 much more wisely if TriMet was at the table being able to work with us and scale up their ability to help.
This is more of a statement, I think, than a question, but it will cut to the tone of what we're talking about. This is a question from a member of our audience who identifies him or herself as homeless, who talks about being told that he or she must go from where they are, and so the question is, where can they go? And so I return to the opening remarks about the bewildering experience of hitting the street and deciding what to do and what the steps are, because nobody's really quite schooled in that experience. And if 30% of the folks are struggling with mental illness and another 18% with addiction and others with disabilities, you have a very, very large cohort of people who need active outreach and assistance. What is the level of active outreach that we now have, Deborah?
Well, this is one of the lessons that we've learned, is that outreach is crucial. A lot of the folks that you're talking about can't, and due to lack of bus passes and abilities to get out on transportation, won't be able to show up for a 2 p.m. appointment across town. They need someone to come find them. They need someone to do outreach. Somebody from an organization like Join, one of my favorite nonprofits, who works with people who are experiencing homelessness, that's what they do. They go out into the community and go to places, meet people where they are, find them on the streets, and work with them, gain their trust and their understanding that we're here to help, we're not here to judge, we're not here to put you in a program that you don't want to be in, we're here to help you. And I think having outreach, and that's one of the things that we talk a lot about in our plan, A Home for Everyone, is getting out to people who are on the streets and and talking with them, meeting them, and getting them into housing.
This is a kind of a regional question from the audience. Another excellent question. How would a partnership work with our neighbors to the north in Vancouver and Clark County, and is that desirable?
Well, I will say Vancouver just voted, the city council, which is a pretty moderate conservative city council, just voted this week to put a $20 million housing levy on the ballot because they're experiencing the same kind of housing crisis that we are. So we all have things to learn. And the big lesson there is we cannot let Vancouver show Portland up.
This, again, it's my job to ask the ugly. This is a question from the audience, but it's a question that I hear. I get phone calls asking me this as well, and I would love for anyone on the panel to field it, and that is, could you please tell me why, as a taxpayer, owe anything to the homeless?
Can I take that one? So,
Yes.
I mean, what I would say is you don't owe anyone anything, but we live in a community, and it's the circle of life. So we want to have a livable community. We want our businesses to thrive. We want to be able to pay people fair wages. You know, as a business owner, if my business isn't doing well, then I can't pay good wages, and then they can't get a home, and then we cycle through this whole issue again. So it's to your best interest. And we're going to pay for it one way or another, so we might as well be productive.
Michelle, could you go to the, I'd love you to annotate a little bit on the we're going to pay for it one way or another part.
We're already paying for it. My business, you know, we've had to expand security, we've had to expand sanitation issues, recruiting is a problem. You know, these are just the realities. People don't want to hear this, but this is the truth. And so, as I said earlier, we are at a tipping point, so we need to make some smart decisions. And Portland's very nice. I mean, I'm from Boston, trust me. You guys are nice. And there's generosity and compassion, and we don't want to, we want to leverage that. Israel talks about compassion fatigue in his TED Talk. And I don't think we're there yet, but I think we could get there. So why not pool our resources?
On that note, how do people get involved if they have ideas on how to dispatch the services needed to a person that is in need of immediate assistance? I think that goes beyond the impulse to call 911 if I'm reading the question correctly. What is the best guidance on that, Israel?
You can call 211, which can help be able to potentially get people resources. It's really important that you communicate to the police that you want a welfare check, so that the police are arriving on the scene understanding that somebody is in need, and it's not a situation where somebody could potentially end up in a different situation. So you can call non-emergency or 911 and ask for a welfare check if you think anybody is in need, and the police will do good work to be able to check on those individuals.
Mitch, I'd like to go back to the business community's participation, and this comes off a follow-up question from the audience, which asks what are the best, most productive ways the business community can get involved. I think it would be good if we could name some of those. The fact that people are at the table is good, it's thematic. Can you talk specifically, sir, about some of the measures that can be taken other than writing a big check? Or maybe that's
a good one.
Maybe that too.
The business community is already involved, and that's what I tried to make the point earlier. You know, Michelle's exactly right, and to answer the question, I think our community is past the question of why do I owe the homeless anything. I believe we have a consensus that services to homeless are a core obligation of the community. Therefore, it's a core obligation of the city and the county. And our tax dollars should be used to address that. I think many in the business community believe that we have not prioritized our spend on homelessness sufficiently. within our taxes that we're already paying. We'd like to see a higher priority. I believe everybody agrees this is our top priority in our community, and I think our budgets need to reflect that. And
pardon the interruption, you're talking about the city's budget, the way the
Correct.
money is allocated from
Correct.
taxes we all pay.
yeah.
You would dispute that they're properly targeted.
No, I really, dispute is kind of a pejorative.
Okay.
I would just suggest that perhaps our spend is not aligned with our rhetoric yet, especially on the services side. Creating more housing is important, but at the most needy level, we need to house our chronically mentally ill, our chronically drug and alcohol dependent, and other folks that are just long-term habitually struggling. And that is that's an obligation that's going to cost money, and we're going to need both new revenue and a renewed commitment to prioritize the money we already have towards the services that we're going to need to wrap around that housing to ensure that we don't end up where Israel said, which is with more homeless on the street after our investment.
We've heard a lot about the success that Salt Lake City has had with a very big lift from its faith community. The faith community in Portland has been very active as well. Is it, no judgments allowed here, is it where it needs to be? Do they need to be a different kind of partner? Or are they just, where it's at is just right, no matter what the mix looks like over the next year?
I have an opinion on that.
Please.
I spent a lot of time with Lloyd Pendleton from Salt Lake, and there's a significant faith-based stream to what's going on in San Antonio, which is wonderful. Our community is, I believe, every bit as connected and committed to this social obligation. Faith is a part of it, but it is not a necessary ingredient for us to be successful. The faith-based community has always pulled their weight and will continue to pull their weight and will be part of our solution. But we're different, and as Mayor-elect said, we're going to learn from what everybody else is doing, but we're going to have to create our own secret sauce. We're not going to probably have a billionaire to write a big check like they had in San Antonio. We don't have a unity of cultural interest like they do in Salt Lake through the church. So maybe we're going to have to look a little more like Bernie and have a bunch of small checks and a bunch of small contributions and a united community to get where we want to go. But I think suggesting that we don't have a person write a big check or we don't have the unifying faith-based community is an excuse, and it ought to just be pushed aside.
We keep talking about San Antonio and Salt Lake City. Is there a city in the country now that has, if you will, its secret sauce that might look different from what we come up with, but is different from San Antonio and Salt Lake City? Do we know of such a place? Ted?
Oh, I was hoping you weren't going to put that one on me. I think there's pieces of excellence in a variety of cities. Vancouver, British Columbia,
Yes.
I think has developed a really good and positive relationship with their business community, particularly developers. They have a modular housing model that was created in conjunction with one of their modular housing developers that's been very successful. Albuquerque has a great job program called The Better Way that I would encourage people to look at their 3-minute video. It's really encouraging, inspirational, and the video is done from the perspective of people who were chronically homeless, but then were lifted back into employability through that program. We've talked about Salt Lake. We've talked about San Antonio. Denver has some ideas. Even the mayor of Seattle now has some ideas. There's lots of ideas. And again, I don't think we're looking for the lock, stock, barrel and saying, Dubuque, Iowa has it down. Let's do what Dubuque does, because we're not Dubuque. We're Portland, Oregon. I want to just make two quick, weird sort of segues. Segue weird number one. On the faith question, the faith community in Portland is absolutely engaged on this issue and would love to be more engaged on this issue. In fact, my entree into hands-on service delivery around the homelessness situation happened around 1998-99 at the Goose Hollow Family Shelter, and I was brought in through a coalition of local faith-based organizations that wanted to do something. They provided the volunteers to make that organization work, and of course it's expanded, and it's been a great help to many families with kids in the community. That's thing number one. Segue number two, I was just in Roseburg. And guess what the issue that they wanted to talk about around the table was in Roseburg? They wanted to talk about what they could learn from what we're doing in Portland to help them with their homeless situation in Roseburg. This is everywhere, as somebody said, and nobody, I think, has landed on the perfect model, but there's a lot of good opportunities out there, but we're going to have to build our own, folks. That's the bottom line. We are our own community, our own needs, and our own capacities, and our own network of relationships, and it's going to look different here, but we can learn a ton from what's working elsewhere around the country and around the world.
Well, let's go to something you brought up earlier, and that is the state's involvement, that is the state of Oregon. So to the degree we can accept that we have an acute circumstance in Portland, it's also pretty darn acute in Beaverton and Gresham, and you tell us Roseburg is experiencing it. What is the best forward role that the state of Oregon, the legislature, could take?
Big picture, number one, they could keep pressing around housing affordability. Number two has been raised many times around this table. We decentralized mental health service at the state level. That decentralization of mental health services was done with the implied or even the overt promise of more community-based mental health services to help take up the slack. The dollars weren't forthcoming. And therefore, what happened was the state basically transferred responsibility for mental health delivery from the state to local jurisdictions without the adequate resources to be able to make that happen. I would love for the state and the governor and the legislative leadership to really say they are going to make a war of addressing mental health delivery. And by the way, I want to go farther than that. I have not yet heard any of the presidential candidates speak convincingly about what is a national embarrassment, and that is and you can quote me on this, the craptacular nature of mental health delivery all across the United States of America. We've got to do better, and it's contributing to this problem. I'll add one more thing, and then I promise I'll stop. Again, we're different here in America. We have an opiate addiction problem, and I think most people in this audience are clearly aware of that. That opiate addiction problem is leading to a rebirth of both meth and heroin on the streets here in the city of Portland. That's another issue that local governments probably cannot solve on their own. That will require more regional, more state, even more national support to help address it. And again, that's not a Portland problem, Portland-specific problem. That is a national issue.
Israel.
I would also say that it's up to all of us. I think that we have to become more sophisticated at a statewide level and being able to meet people where they're at. I want to meet Joe Republican in Ashland over eggs at his local diner to talk about the issue. And we have to break the rural-urban divide. So that's up to us as housing advocates. That's up to all of us to be more sophisticated, to communicate with our friends, our neighbors, and our peers. And I would also say that it's the media's role. You have a bully pulpit, and you are the Oregonian, and you have the ability to take this anti-tax, anti-government rhetoric that we know drives people into poverty and turn that around to lead us into, join us as the media. I'm fully aware as a publisher and a reporter that you have the ability to choose how you're covering a specific subject matter. And we have to be able, so you have the opportunity to join us and to tell that narrative, so.
You are invited to the next 3 editorial board meetings if you're choosing. We need to go really micro here, and I don't know that anybody. I mean, the question is framed around the city of Portland, but let's talk about the whole area. And Deborah, you probably have a very good sense of this. And think small. What have we tried that has demonstrably helped, and what have we tried and learned that has flopped? And I would add, how do we know, and when do we know those things?
Well, I think one thing that we've tried that has worked is the housing first model. And it's not easy to do, but I would say that we used to have this theory that people have to be ready for housing. They have to pass all these tests before we allow them to get back into housing. Really, you're going to show up for your appointment to talk with a mental health counselor if you don't have a place to live. It's just not going to work. It's proven time and time again that people who have housing are much more able to address their needs than people who don't. It's not rocket science, but it's worked very well. And also, we've also found that for some people, not everybody, but for some people, just giving a few months of rent assistance, it's getting harder in this market, will actually get people back on their feet and stable, and we don't see them again, and a year later, they're still in their housing. So different strategies work for different people. I would say that what hasn't worked is trying to do a one-size-fits-all model, whether it's everybody needs permanent supportive housing, or everybody is successful if we give them keys to an apartment and then we never see them again. That doesn't work either. We really need to tailor different, we've said this many times, it's a complex situation. Everybody's homeless for a different reason. And being able to tailor your responses to fit the needs of the individual is what's going to keep people successful.
This is a great question. If we have suggestions and ideas, where can we share them? There's no great www.homelessnesshelpme.com. So who do people call? They think the county, they think the city, they think Israel's outfit. They call me.
Well, as of today, we have a joint office on homelessness at Multnomah County. That's an effort with the city of Portland. And we have a director, and his name is Mark Jolin, and he loves it when I give it his phone number, so I'm not going to be. It's right here in the front row. He runs our Home for Everyone plan. He's the director of the joint office. We have staff. We have dollars that we're going to be putting on the street to help people, and I would suggest getting a hold of him or someone in his office.
This is a question that I was kind of saving up my version of it for later, but let's go with it right now. The question specifically is, quote, what innovative strategies can we start doing today? Not tomorrow, not 5 years out. And I will go to if the questioner doesn't mind, I'll sort of pad that a little bit and say, I'm hearing a lot of really cool things tonight. I'm hearing a lot of very positive, specific to Portland ideas, and a braiding of effort by many, many constituents. But as I hear them, I'm also thinking, what does the clock look like? How long does this take? Because again, I return to what we started with, the summer is here, the numbers are gonna bump up, and when do we start seeing a difference? Anyone?
I'd like to jump in on that.
Thank you.
We're in the process of designing a permanent solution, and that permanent solution includes emergency shelter, temporary housing, and permanent housing. And I think Israel mentioned that The more dollars we spend today to address our current problem, the less dollars we have to devote to a permanent solution in the future. All true. As we make these investments, if they're permanent and expensive, they need to be very thoughtful. Thanks to the chair's leadership, we're going to have 3 permanent shelters opened here in the next few months. That is a tremendous step forward. And it puts a dent into the question that the homeless person asked earlier, which essentially is, what do I do tonight? But it does not answer that question. And one of the biggest challenges we're running into is citing permanent facilities. And when we talk about spending $100 million, we need to be thoughtful. And it needs to be a site that is, we take time and identify it, we evaluate it, we design it, we construct it, and then we start occupying it. 2-3 years in reality for big sites. Now, it can be shortened. What we need to also be thinking about are low cost, and this is finally getting to your question, Lynn, low cost, immediate, temporary alternatives that are imperfect to get our citizens out of the outdoors. And I believe that we need to redouble our efforts to look at property that is already in the community's possession. The city owns literally hundreds of buildings. Many are underutilized, many are unused, there are empty lots, all of which are imperfect for a permanent solution. But between now and when we are able to put in place our more permanent temporary shelters and more permanent emergency shelters, we believe that we ought to be trying finding a floor in a current office building that is underutilized that the city owns, or the Southeast Precinct. And I'm not saying that that's the perfect site, but we need to say why not no, it's not perfect because. Why not? Why don't we move out the few employees that are in there? It has showers, it has a kitchen, and throw a little bit of money at it and bring people indoors for 6 months, 12 months, while we put in place these other things. So that is a place where I think we really can do better. And it's a short-term solution, imperfectly executed, but at least it's executed.
And would that go beyond available space that you might say, let's clear out and make available? I mean, I'm thinking very specifically, old train cars, old storage pods. How far would you go with these so-called imperfect, just for the next 6 months, let's patch it through solutions?
Len, I think everything would be on the table, and what it needs to be compared to is not, does it meet our long-term goals?
Right.
It needs to be balanced against, is it better than sleeping in a sleeping bag on the street?
Tonight, in the rain.
Tonight in the rain.
Thank you. Question about displacement. I'll read it specifically and then talk for a quick second. How do you create a relationship between businesses, e.g. Pacific Northwest College of Art, that have quickly taken over or relocated into neighborhoods that have historically had a dense population of homeless people who are being forced to find other places to stay because of the new student populations who feel that their presence make them unsafe? I think we can just trim that to how do we deal with displacement of the homeless?
Ooh, this is the conundrum. And this is where every mayor and Ted's going to get it in 6 months, and every mayor in the past 20 years has had to deal with this intersection that's very difficult. So, historically, you could have different places that we call low barrier camping, that if you took care of your stuff and you were clean and you picked up after yourself, you would be able to go. That used to be the Pearl District, the Warehouse District. Used to be Old Town. Old Town's changing. Used to be Inner East Side Portland. Used to be the Warehouse District along the waterfront. And so all of these places are off the table or a product of our own success, I like to say. And so the Springwater Corridor is a direct result of not being able to camp in a neighborhood like Buckman that traditionally held the view that thousands of people or hundreds of people were going to be on the street. So you ask police officers, businesses, housing advocates, where do people go? Nobody knows. Portland's public parks have become refugee camps strictly because there is no physical space for people to move. Where do you move people? So it's a conundrum, it's quicksand, it's a hard intersection that we all have to come together to figure out, and it's all the more reason to have the urgency that we have today in all the work that we're doing.
So if I could chime
Please.
in on this, and I know my better political instincts tell me not to, but I'm going to anyway. Because I don't think I have until January 1st. I mean, this is an ongoing conversation, and I want to be an active participant now. And I want to second something that Mitch said, or at least implied, when he said that we need solutions now, imperfect though they may be. I've worried that we have not been as creative or as flexible in our approach to the homelessness emergency that's currently unfolding on our streets. And one of the things that's just been nagging me in the back of my mind is, I keep hearing all of this conversation about a Cascadia scale earthquake. And as mayor, along with the chair, I'm going to be in the line of fire a couple of minutes after that happens. And the question I've been asking myself isn't about what are we going to do with 1,800 people who are homeless. What are we going to do if it's 10 or 15 or 20,000 people who suddenly find themselves homeless, and we find that our infrastructure, including our water delivery systems, is demolished, our transportation systems and our ability to get help to people is in some way impaired? If we can't figure out how, as Mitch just, I think, challenged us to be creative and flexible and accept imperfect solutions, how the heck are we going to realistically address a large-scale disaster? And I also see an opportunity here to ask people who maybe we haven't fully asked. We've got Alyssa sitting in the audience. What would her husband do? What's he do when he goes overseas and sees humanitarian crises? What would the National Guard do? How would they set up temporary shelter with access to service and water and showers and food and things like that? I just feel like there's more people who can come to the conversation. Europe just went through a massive, they're still going through a massive refugee and immigration crisis. And even companies like IKEA that have hordes of young creative designers have come up with temporary shelters that are low cost, flexible, easy to move. I just feel like there's, in a city this creative and innovative, there's got to be more that we could do to address the immediacy of this problem. That's my gut reaction.
This question, I'm going to out the author because he's the guy who's been turning earth on having a big campus at Terminal 1. The developer, Homer Williams, who's in the room, asks a very intriguing question. Right now, there's a 100,000 square foot empty warehouse on Terminal 1, and from the Department of Flexible Imperfect Choices, I would add, why not focus turning that into a temporary, quick, near-term solution? Anyone?
I'll take it.
It's not quite
I
radioactive.
think everything should be on the table. And I don't want to, I'm not the expert on Terminal 1. And I know Commissioner Fish sent me a very thoughtful email that outlined what are probably some very legitimate concerns about Terminal 1. So I want the word to get back to him that I'm not in any way being disrespectful to him or his team. But, you know, Terminal 1 has been vacant for something like 4 years.
Yes.
And the last time I was inside Terminal 1, it was because Nike had done this Nike Track Town thing where they actually built a world-class indoor track. They took 2 weeks to do it. They put temporary bathrooms and showers on the exterior. They backed a truck up to the building that was able to provide heat since it was the middle of the winter. They built viewing stands. They met all the codes, and of course, being that it was Nike, they were clever enough to put an indoor retail facility there as well. And they did it for an event that lasted all of 2 weeks. And so that sort of got my juices flowing. Well, wow, if they can do that for something as antithetical to a warehouse as a world indoor track, which, by the way, I didn't even know existed until I saw one, and run a retail facility and water and showers and heat, certainly it seems to me for at least the winter, you could create something. And we have architects and designers and creatives here. It's an ugly warehouse. I mean, it is ugly. It's not what I would describe at first glance as something I'd say is a really humane solution. But if we could do something creative and unusual and different, it starts to walk us more towards a uniquely Portland solution to a really difficult problem.
We've got just 3 or 4 minutes left. I'm going to do some real quick questions here from the audience, and they're questions I've heard before. What about the people who, quote, choose to live on the street? There are such folks.
I would challenge that. I've never met a human being that chose to be homeless for any period of time. Now there are a lot of people that will tell you that they choose to be homeless, but the path that they arrived at to be at that specific spot has been a long journey. Homelessness is traumatic. People go through multiple nervous breakdowns on the way to experiencing homelessness. And it is such a traumatic experience to actually lose everything and have your dignity stripped away. People give up. And giving up is because we've not responded to giving people an opportunity to be successful. And that's the reason people will say that I choose to be homeless. I've never met anyone in my life that at the end of the day wouldn't take a warm bed and a roof over their head if given the opportunity.
Can I jump in there? So
Yes.
I think there may be some people in the audience that are saying, what happens in the summer? Because there's a phenomenon that happens here in the summer, and we call it the traveling youth. And I think maybe
I'm
that's...
sorry, did you say traveling youth?
Yeah, traveling
Okay.
youth. So I think that might be the genesis of that question. My experience is that, the winters are very different than the summers, and we have to kind of separate the predators from the truly needy. And so I think that's where the confusion comes, because it's really complicated, as everyone's saying, but we don't really, as residents and business owners, we don't understand that and what's the solution?
And again, my response is the vast majority of homeless youth on our streets, hopping trains, punk rockers, people with pit bulls that make you feel uncomfortable, have most likely gone through some pretty horrific things in their life. Domestic violence, being kicked out of their home due to the fact that they're LGBTQ. Again, sure, there's adventurers out there. Everybody likes a good adventure every once in a while in their life, but the vast majority of homeless youth have gone through hell to get to the place that they're at, to be isolated on the streets. And so it's just important not to judge a book by its cover, because we all come from different experiences in our life. So.
Deborah?
I would also like to put this in the lessons learned category. If you're married or you have a partner who you're living with, you might have a dog, and you're potentially high. You can't go into a shelter. The rules that have been set up in the past for shelter in Portland have been very high. The bar has been so high that people, when they say they don't want to go into shelter, it's because they would have to separate from their loved one. They have to go alone. They have to leave their dog. They have to follow a set of rules. You're in by a certain hour. You're out by a certain hour. You got to have the lights. I mean, this is not treating people like human beings. This is treating people in a patronizing manner that's meant to control their behavior. This is one of the lessons that we've learned. We need to have shelters and housing that meet people where they're at, and I know that's not grammatically correct, but we need to have places where people can go as couples and people can bring their pets, and I think that's will help dispel this myth that people don't want to be inside.
Could we please have a round of applause for our just terrific panel? I thank you all for coming tonight on this terrifically pressing problem for which I think, if I heard everything correctly tonight, is owned by everybody in the room. Thank you.
I'm